This is Daryl Evans with Kings Vision at LAKings.com with Kings insider John Rosen. Well, the Kings bounced back last night, get themselves back in the series against the Blackhawks. A huge win on home ice, defeating the Blackhawks by a score of 3-1. That included an empty net goal by Dwight King, his first goal of the postseason. And the Kings, a solid effort right from the beginning of the game. Really controlled it from the opening minute to the last minute. It was a huge win.
Yeah, I really liked the full 60-minute effort from the LA Kings. Compared to Game 1, where they had the lead after the first period but weren't playing their best hockey. Game 2, they had a strong middle 17 minutes of that first period, but were trailing 2-0 after one. I thought they controlled play in the first period. They had that early goal. The Kings, in the last 15 games of this winning streak at home, they've only given up first period goals in one of those games, and that was the game to the St. Louis Blues, where the Kings and Blues were tied 2-2 after one. Meanwhile, the Kings were able to build on that lead, go up 2-0, and then in that third period, I like that the Kings did not really sit back and get into that kind of prevent-style defense. They didn't go into any type of a defensive shell. The Kings still had some zone time in that third period. Naturally, the Blackhawks will have that push. They have so many elite offensive weapons on that squad. That was only natural, but it was really not until late in that period where the Blackhawks really began to threaten heavily. I just thought it was a strong 60-minute effort, one of the Kings' best of this postseason.
I think when you look at the Kings from the standpoint, they needed a big game from some of their veteran players. I thought Justin Williams is one of those players. Aside from scoring the goal on that early part of the game, I thought he had an outstanding shift. He made some physical contact. He was handling the puck. Dustin Brown, the captain of the Kings, I thought he set the tone early on with some big hits, taking out Patrick Sharp. He finished his checks all over the place. They needed those guys to elevate their game, and Justin Williams continues to rise to the occasion in the postseason. He had the game winner against San Jose, including both goals in that series in that final game. Last night, the huge one for the Kings. Now, while scoring the first goal of the games in the postseason, the Kings improved their record to 8-2. That's going to be a big thing for the Kings again when they attack Game 4 tomorrow night.
Yeah, as they say, big game players step up big in big games. Another player that had a strong game was Drew Doughty. Matt Green, also somebody that defensively had one of his signature efforts of the postseason. When you talk about Justin Williams, really that will to win, we've written about it a little bit on LAKings.com, but he was somebody that right out from the outset, he helped set that tone that the Los Angeles Kings were looking to go out there and put forth for that 60 minutes. The opening goal was started when he was forechecking. Colin Fraser also in there on the forecheck on that line. He stripped the puck from Nick Leddy, who otherwise had been having a solid series for the Chicago Blackhawks. He got in there, a nice stick handling to be able to create a little bit of space, weathered a hook, got the puck deep again, and then on an exchange between Slava Voinov and Rob Scuderi, Voinov really just a beautiful vision to be able to find Justin Williams on that left side of the ice, and before Crawford could really move laterally enough, Williams had already snapped the puck between the goaltender and that near post. Really great puck movement. Thought that was a beautiful goal. Also, how about Slava Voinov, what he's been able to do so far in this postseason? Voinov, another strong effort, 2 more assists. I mean, he's turning into somebody that if the Kings were fortunate enough to be able to go in and win the Stanley Cup, this is a huge if right now that we're talking about right now. So much hockey to be played. Kings still down in the series, but Slava Voinov, somebody that could be a dark horse Conn Smythe Trophy winner, considering what he's been able to do this postseason.
Yeah, Slava Voinov's actually 2 points last night, a goal and assist. He gets credit for the game-winning goal. It was that blast on the broken stick. That was the second goal of the game, building the Kings a 2-0 lead. Shortly after the Kings opened up that 2-0 lead, there was an opportunity for the Kings really to deliver the dagger to the Chicago Blackhawks. Were unable to do so. We saw that Jeff Carter, along with Duncan Keith, they got tied up in front of the Blackhawk net, going back down the ice the other way. Duncan Keith took a slash, hitting Jeff Carter up in the facial area. He had to go for some stitches. He ended up drawing a double minor for high sticking there. Probably should have merited a major penalty for high sticking, but the Kings had the man advantage, and again, a chance to open up a 3-0 lead. They only had 1 shot on goal, 4 minutes of straight power play time. That's an area where the Kings have to be a little bit more desperate, a little bit more connected out there. Penalty killers for the Blackhawks have been outstanding in the postseason. They've only given up 2 goals and 53 penalties, but Kings power play unit has to deliver in those key situations.
Absolutely, when you have the chance to take your opponent out of the game there in that second period. Of course, the Kings were without Jeff Carter, who was getting stitched up. He said it was around 20 stitches that he took after that incident. Also chipped and cracked a couple teeth courtesy of that high stick from Duncan Keith. Also, Mike Richards obviously was not able to take part in that power play as well, so the Kings had one of their premier playmakers, one of their premier snipers out of that power play unit. These are excuses, of course. You don't want to be able to have to fall back on this. I did like otherwise, other than that 4-minute power play, the Kings did have very good movement with the man advantage in that game. I loved Drew Doughty on the power play yesterday too. Saw some time with Slava Voinov out there. Of course, Drew Doughty at the end of the first period hit that post squarely on a blast when he was wide open from that right circle as well. He was somebody that was able to get those good looks. I've liked the Kings' looks that they've had on this power play. They also had that power play goal back in game number 2, the one that Tyler Toffoli scored, I believe. So it was, the looks are there. The movement has been there, but Chicago, a team that blocks a lot of shots while they're penalty killing, and a team that obviously, in addition to all the offensive weapons that they have, still a strong defensive team with good depth defensively and good goaltending. All it means right now is that the Kings have pulled themselves back into the series, down 2-1. This game coming up, Game 4, Thursday at Staples Center, should be a huge one for both of these teams.
I think when you get to the postseason, not necessarily the success of your power play is measured in percentage. Regardless of what your percentage is, it's the time of your goals. The power play goal scored in Chicago the other day, I look at that as not much of a factor. The game had already been decided. A late power play goal by Tyler Toffoli, again, meant nothing, had no impact on the hockey game. But if the Kings were able to yesterday with that double minor to Duncan Keith, had they been able to score there, I think they really would have taken charge of the hockey game. Jonathan Quick wasn't busy in the game, but late in the game he was called upon to make a huge save. He did so against Brian Bickle. He's been one of the hottest Hawks. He's got 7 goals in the postseason. That save was huge. Blackhawks, if they tie that up, who knows what happens from there.
Absolutely, and you just mentioned Brian Bickle has been one of the best forwards, not only on the Blackhawks, but in all of the National Hockey League so far this postseason. You talk about what the key ingredients are to winning postseason hockey games, having your top players play well, having your goaltenders perform well, lack of injuries, something that's also going well for the Chicago Blackhawks right now. You also talk about unsung heroes. Kings are getting that unsung performance, somewhat sung maybe, with Slava Voinov, but Brian Bickle, his size, his ability to finish right around the Chicago net, a huge asset for the Chicago Blackhawks team. He scored on a nice wraparound, of course, at the end of the second period, and Jonathan Quick coming up huge to stone him at the end of the third period. You need your goaltender in those types of situations. Jonathan Quick has been phenomenal throughout the entirety of the games, in just about every single game this postseason. So it was a great, real juxtaposition there. One of the postseason's top snipers so far this year, and really the postseason's best goaltender. Quick able to come up with a huge save. Kings are going to need him for the remainder of this series, remainder of the playoffs.
Well, we go back and we talk about that high stick by Duncan Keith on the Kings. Jeff Carter, understand that today he met with the NHL this morning, had a hearing. We don't know what the results are, but that could be a factor moving ahead. I think it's probably something that would merit a suspension. I think if it happened in the regular season, it would have definitely been handed out, but I don't think the league should discriminate against that. I think Duncan Keith should receive at least 1 game, and we'll be interested. I'm sure we'll hear sometime this afternoon the result of that hearing.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. Obviously, when you're looking at the NHL Department of Player Safety and looking to make sure that the players' right to be able to play hockey and their safety is the most important factor, you don't see a whole lot of precedent from one incident to the next. I mean, you can look at other cases. Greg Wyshynski at Puck Daddy wrote about it yesterday, earlier this morning, where he mentioned, of course, there was one high stick by Pierre-Marc Bouchard against Matt Calvert that was between the Wild and the Columbus Blue Jackets in a game last year, where it was almost accidental, where Bouchard raised Calvert's own stick and caught him in the face. That warranted a 2-game suspension. I don't expect to see Keith get 2 games. I think 1 game could be the key. But really, when you talk about one instance to the next, there's not a whole lot of precedent being set. Of course, you talk about Dave Bolland earlier in the series. He didn't even get a call from the National Hockey League, and I thought that was something that went from a low to high position in which the principal point of contact was Mike Richards' head. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, both teams will, when they take the ice tomorrow morning after the morning skate, say it's behind them. They're ready to move on. Doesn't impact how they go out, prepare, approach a game, but certainly could have an impact for game number 4 coming up at Staples Center on Thursday.
Well, we'll definitely comment on the results of the hearing that Duncan Keith had earlier today with the National Hockey League. For John Rosen, I'm Daryl Evans for Kings Vision at LAKings.com.